going to chat here about?
All right. Well, first I should introduce you as Professor.
Well, you're going to talk about that book, about the Selfhood. Oh, okay. Okay, very good.
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, I don't have your other book, but we could talk about that too.
Okay, very good. Let's talk about that one then. That's fine.
Okay, so we've got Professor Corey Anton, assistant professor, right, of communication at Grand Valley State University, and we thank you for joining us today, Corey. I guess to start off, we could talk about your book, Selfhood and Authenticity. I read it maybe 2 months ago, and I guess it draws off of the philosopher Charles Taylor's idea of this culture of authenticity that's sort of infected the modern age. Maybe you could tell us a little bit about what that culture of authenticity is and how it's sort of positively affected our culture, but also it can tend to lead us into this over-individualized, atomistic sort of social setting. Talk a little bit about that?
Well, I mean, I think Charles Taylor's work is important to the introduction of the book, but he's not really central to the arguments of the book. He's more the spring ground for discussing what we ought to mean by self. And so the problem is that there's this recent phenomena, and this recent phenomena is called the culture of authenticity. And there are some people who are for it, and there are some people who are against it. He calls them the boosters and the knockers. Right. And I think what he's trying to suggest is that those who knock it perhaps don't understand a genuine, real concern that people ought to have with their right for a meaningful life. And this is a problem encumbered by self-reflexive, self-aware animals. But I think on the other hand, he wants to say there are these people who are boosters who are perhaps too eager to embrace what it amounts to a culture of self-pandering, self-gratification, and egoism. And so he's trying to say, is it possible to navigate some notion of selfhood that doesn't succumb to this worst form of ego pandering, but also recognizes the genuine need for human worth and value and meaning in a world that maybe is fundamentally ambiguous and needs some sort of meaning for, self-aware beings, something like that.
Okay.
So his work gave a good springboard into answering the question, what is a person if we are to satisfy it without being an ego panderer or without impoverishing ourselves and without, I think we need to recognize the unique office or position of humans compared to other animals or other creatures.
Okay. So then later on in your book, when you get into the main body of the work, you talk about the human being as earthly worldlings, and I really love that phrase. I'm not sure if you coined that or not, but you talk about the human self as sort of embedded in the world, and you almost you hyphenize self-world to emphasize that these aren't two separate substances or two separate entities. These are actually part of the same process of being, of bringing forth the world.
That's right.
So you want to go into a little bit about why you think that's important?
Sure. I mean, I think there's three thinkers, I would say, who that concept really could be attributed to, or maybe four. One is Alan Watts. I think, Alan Watts, his game of hide and seek and his notions of the cocktail party version of Hinduism, some of his notions of the way that the self-aware consciousness emerges out of itself, the world of black and white, all of those references. I think for Jean-Paul Sartre's work in Being and Nothingness, I mean, for Sartre, the problem is that there is being in itself, but being in itself as purely in itself is so full of itself, without any distance, so without any gap, that it really doesn't even exist. He calls it just being in itself. Mm-hmm. What happens is a crack or a fissure, or what he calls internal negation, continuously collapses and makes the space for distances through which the in itself can show itself to what's for itself. The for itself, or the pour soi, is basically consciousness.
Right.
And so consciousness is a nothingness. And so this gets picked up by people like D.E. Harding as he appropriates Western philosophy into Eastern philosophy and suggests that I don't have a head. When I say I don't have a head, I'm saying that my face is the nothingness by which the world makes room for itself. I didn't come into the world, I've come out of it. I'm a place and moment of it, haunting itself as another. The only way that it can come to itself is by having the room-making space of nothingness.
Yes.
That's what you are. You're a nothingness. For Sartre, you're a nothingness, and that nothingness then encumbers itself as a freedom to make decisions, to make oneself, to answer for oneself in terms of history and in terms of others.
Right. You know, I think of Alan Watts's turn of phrase where he talked about the earth peopling as if it were an apple tree appling. And
Yes,
that's a great image to really think
exactly.
about.
Exactly. We're something it's doing.
Right.
Some people take that further. They say the universe is universing.
Yeah.
So I get it when they say that. And then there's this position that says, what the hell are you talking about? And I honestly get it's more this rational reductionist. What the fuck are you talking about, fancy? What, you know, that kind of thing. So what does it mean to kind of really get both these positions and kind of, you know, how do you act as like a moderator? Like, okay, let's play nice now. I'm going to show you how we do that. And try to bring them over with reason and examples.
Right. You mean those who would look at this metaphor of an earthly worldling or of people being sort of the apples of
yes.
the earth?
Yeah.
You think that there are some people who would think that that's too flowery of a metaphor? And that
I think, yeah, I genuinely, and even aspects of my own self, I can, because, you know, it's kind of takes one to know one kind of thing. You've been there, done that.
No. The problem is what could be called, it's what Whitehead called misplaced concreteness.
Yeah.
The misplaced concreteness is beginning with parts where you take the part as if it were a whole,
yes.
but by readjusting your language and your perception, you come to realize that what you call your brain and your heart couldn't exist without the air and the moisture around you. The sun, let me try it this way. If I said to you, which one is you, your heart or the sun? Now, you'd likely tell me that your heart is part of you, but the sun is not you, and yet you need the sun just as much as you need your heart. In fact, only in environments with suns do hearts emerge. We're a smaller part of a larger whole. We're not a self-sufficient whole. Arthur Koestler's work in The Ghost in the Machine, he offers a notion called the holon.
Yep.
And the holon is this two-faced Janus position that weaves between part and whole, and it destabilizes any kind of misplaced concreteness with regard to a whole.
Right, that's right. Well, John and I have been talking in some of our other interviews that we've done over the past few days about moving to a more organic cosmology rather than the mechanistic cosmology that holds sway now. And I think this aspect of recognizing not only the part-whole relationships, that every part is within a larger whole, but also the sense of the connections between, for instance, the sun, life on Earth, you know, all of the animal life that survives on plants is because, you know, the plants are eating photons, and that there's this whole connected, you know, circle of life, right, that we are all embedded in.
Right. And please, so let's continue this metaphor. If we continue on with the problem being one of dealing with parts and wholes, and then the internal negation by which we're able to momentarily separate a part from a whole, and we look at that, what Heidegger does is he offers a tripart ontology of being. He says there are extants, there are entities that live, and then there are beings who exist. Right. Now, an extant is a thing in space or time. Like, look at this. Like, take this pen.
Right.
This pen is a whole within a space and time. Then it has parts, and each part I could take apart and has a part and whole. But when I ask the question about its wholeness, it can be analytically predicated by science exclusively within itself. It always is sort of what itself, and we can measure that. Now, when we move to an animal has a biological birth and a biological beginning. It has biological development and growth. It has a period of development that are critical to it. It has all kinds of processes that are internally and autopoietically regulating itself, and it is characterized by biological cessation. It has memories. It can feel to certain levels. Depending upon the phylogenetic scale, you will get all kinds of different varieties there. When you move to, and that would be what he would call lives, that's a different kind of part whole because it includes a temporal whole rather than just a spatial one. This is a in space whole. An animal is an in time. Humans exist. So when Heidegger says tables and chairs don't exist, he's not denying that tables and chairs are there.
Yeah.
He's just saying existence isn't the proper word to designate the being of a chair or a table. Existence is properly only humans. Only humans exist. This is why Heidegger is so difficult to understand for people.
Yeah.
He's using words very precisely.